Hey, it's news from heaven. Today we're going to be talking about how love is your life. I know, like who am I to be telling you what your life consists of? I'm just saying that it's love. It's not bad news. It's good news. That's actually what we do on this show. It's the news from heaven. And I was thinking about that title, and I was thinking about news from earth. You know, when I go through my phone, it has a little app that gives me news, and it doesn't always get me in a really good, hopeful state of mind. I know that's kind of a cliche, but it's true. I mean, I see a headline about something really bad happened, and okay, well, how can this exist? You know, how can this? And also, you know, the news we get about how we're interacting with each other and all that. This can just add to any kind of self-doubt and fear and whatever else is keeping us in there. There can be kind of this cloud because the picture we see in the news from earth doesn't necessarily clear up any of the stuff that's going on in our head. It can make it worse. The whole thing seems like, is there a missing piece? Like, how is all of this good? But the news from heaven, and I'm not just talking about this show, I'm talking about the actual, like, if heaven could send down, you know, I would like to say a newspaper. I know that we don't do that anymore. But what are the actual headlines about life that we're missing? You know, what completes this picture? What gets us to understand that even though, yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening, there's not just a silver lining, but the whole thing is silver underneath it. You know, that's what we're looking to find out, including the news about your life and who you are, which brings us to, you may wonder, you know, what is my life? If you believe the dark clouds, they say your life is kind of a waste of time, that you're not worth very much, or your life has gone terribly wrong. And we're here today to say instead, love is your life. Which sounds like, okay, cool, you can post that on Instagram and see if you get any likes on it. It's kind of a pithy little something. But let's dig into what that might actually mean. Like and subscribe. That is the life of videos like this. That is what allows them to get out to places. And you can download the book and follow along. We're right at the beginning of Divine Love and Wisdom. You can see here, click the link, download the thing. We started this wonderful NCE, faithful to the original. He really had these ornaments in the original editions. Angelic Wisdom about divine love. This is part 1. This is how the whole thing starts. This is not the first book he wrote in his spiritual phase, but this is like not too far down the line, and it's sort of the start of if you want to know who you are and what you are. Love is our life. Told you the title came from something. And that just sounds like something you could just say. Like you're a guru and you say, love is your life. Okay, that doesn't mean anything. Let's see if it means something. And does Swedenborg get that that's a strange thing to say? For most people, the existence of love is a given, but the nature of love is a mystery. That right there, nobody's going to say, if I say, even you looking at the title of this show, yeah, love is our life. Okay, yeah, I get that could mean something because I know there's love around. But what is love actually? What is? I'm not going to sing that song. I always sing it when that comes up. What is love? What does it do? What is it composed of, actually, is what I should say. As for the existence of love, this we know, and how do we know it? From everyday language. It's not necessarily because it's in the dictionary, it's just because how we talk about it. We say, someone loves us. You know, hopefully you can say that about someone. That monarchs love their subjects, and that subjects love their monarch. I don't know. The old monarchy isn't as prevalent as it once was, but as we all know, we love our elected officials, and they love us. We say that a husband loves his wife and that a mother loves her children and vice versa. And look at the scope we're starting to introduce here. These are very different relationships, yet we're using the same word to describe them all. We say that people love their country, their fellow citizens, their neighbor. We use the same language about impersonal objects, saying that someone loves this or that thing. You know, I love Nintendo games, which is true. That is a very different thing than saying, you know, I love my child or my spouse. But yet, it's a very different feeling. But yet we use the same word. Even though the word love is so commonly on our tongues, so we've established, people know that there's something like love out there. Nobody's saying like there's no such thing as love. Still, hardly anyone knows what love is. We know when we're feeling it or doing it, but what is this thing? When we stop to think about it, we find that we cannot form any image of it in our thoughts. So just try it. See, maybe you can. Just picture, okay, don't picture the thing you love, but picture love. To me, I do just get this clear sort of nothingness. We find out that we can, so we say either that it's not really anything, or that it's simply something that flows into us from our sight, hearing, touch, and conversation, and therefore influences us. This right here, when you're talking about, where's it? Flows into us. If you're hanging out with Swedenborg, you're going to get nice and tired of things flowing in because you hear about it so much. It's not how you usually think about things. But what he's saying here is, you got us, right? And love being something that flows in is, just think of the way we now understand that photons are flowing into your eye. I think I'm getting this right. So you have a bunch of these little particles of light, coming in through your whatever's in there, cornea, retina, stuff like that, hitting these rods and cones. And it's because of this constant streaming in of that, data, that we can form a picture of what's around us. So here we might say, well, love isn't actually a thing. It's just a set of things. We see over here, we see our video games here, we see our spouse over here, we see our country or our group that we're in or something, and we can say, because we interact with these things visually or through touch or something like that, that just all the different sensations we get from those different sensory interactions, that's what brings up this thing in us that we call love. So love is just sort of this thing that emerges from our interactions with all of these things. So that's, you could just say that's what love is. We are wholly unaware that it is our very life. This is not something that you naturally think, because I don't know about you, but I think that generally that, okay, I have a life, and my life is my ability to exist consciously. It's when I move around and do things. It's when I interact with these objects and things. And occasionally during that life, I feel love. I don't always. Sometimes I'm just feeling boredom, or I'm feeling checked out, or I feel some kind of despair or something. But then I come into contact with things like, say I see my family and I feel like, oh yeah, I love them. Or I am eating ice cream and I say, I love this ice cream, but don't eat too much of it because, lactose. So the love pops up once in a while, but you can go long periods without having any love in there, right? And isn't that what it feels like when you're deep in the throes of, how often can you feel like, there's no love in my life? Nobody loves me. I don't love anyone. Both can be equally distressing, to feel like, I'm not worth loving, nobody loves me, or not, I don't love anything, what's wrong with me, or life is colorless and tasteless. So, what we're seeing here is that actually the constant is love. That your life is love. That you can think there's no love in your life, but that's an oxymoron, because your love is your life. Your life is love. So you can't say there's no love in love. What are you talking about? It's our very life. Not just the general life of our whole body and all of our thoughts, but the life of their every least detail. Swedenborg is cool. This is why I think so. Okay, I get it. Life of the whole body. Okay, I can get that you can be talking about your body has a life to it and the details of the body. I don't need to try to draw, a person's body. That would be a waste of time. Oops, I'm already all the way through it. Oh, look at that Yeti. And that you could say your body has to live. There has to be some kind of, substance, let's say it's blue, that's animating, that differentiates it from inanimate matter. And we know that if you zoomed way, way in, you would have, little cellular details that he's talking about, and those would be filled with whatever life is. We don't really have a great scientific definition for life as far as I know. Whatever it is, it does all the things, all the characteristics we lump together to call them life. I get that. But then the life of all our thoughts and the details of those thoughts. To think that we have, sort of the conscious plane of our existence, the things that occur to you day to day, like, look at that, I'm doing an internet show about Swedenborg stuff right now. Or why am I watching this internet? These little sentences that pop into your head, or these little perceptions. And Swedenborg's saying that there's those two, just like a body can be just a corpse or a living person, depending on the presence or absence of life, your thoughts have a life to them. They are animated by a something. And Swedenborg is saying it's love. And the detail. One of the things that is the most potent about the picture of life to me that Swedenborg offers is that thoughts, let's say this goes to being one thought, thoughts have structure and detail to them. Because if you're just thinking of being back here, and there's some concept that's starting to get pretty cluttered, but there's some concept, like let's say from this negative cloud in your life comes this, like, you have no value. And that thought that appears to you as like a single kind of thought, a single sort of experience that you get there, and it's causing all kinds of distress in your life. And it just feels like a monolith. Like this is just one piece of true information. But Swedenborg is saying that actually that thought, if you zoomed in on it, looked at it under a microscope, it's actually composed of many things. Like it's composed of some kind of, there's an initial lie in there about who you are. It's somehow blocking the truth that your life is love. It's somehow got these little fans here that catch and destroy any concepts that are trying to come in of remembering good times in your life. It's also got who knows what else is in there, some kind of twisting of the good things that other people have ever said about you, it's so that it bottles those up so they don't access you. Just like a virus has little pieces, these thoughts have little pieces, and that it's not that it seems like when this thought comes in here, it's just projecting there's just some giant reality in front of you. You have no value, and that's what you're seeing, but really, it's just this little thing blocking your sight, and that if you took some of these pieces out of here, you would see that's not actually a reality at all. You're actually great. But so that's the freedom from this idea that there's details of thoughts, and those can be good details or bad details, potent in the way we look at them as negative details. Wise people can grasp this when you ask, if you take away the effects of love, can you think anything? So this is where we start to get into how could love be the soul of thoughts. Can you do anything? As the effects of love lose their warmth, do not thoughts and speech and acts and actions lose theirs as well? Do they not warm up as love warms up? And what that, I think, means is we're talking about love as motivation, that when we go in, we really want to think about something. There's something driving us to want to dive into that. It's sort of like if you can prove thing X, it means you'll get this much money. If I'm thinking about short sellers of stock, where they have bet that a certain company is going to fail, and if that company fails, they make a bunch of money from it. They're going to dive in voraciously to getting information that seems to indicate that this company is doing things wrong, and then spread that information to others, because that information, there's a clear motive there to this is why you want to bring it. If you have a particular worldview and a certain scientific study seems to support your worldview, you will dive in and want to learn everything about it because there's a love there that's driving it. So that's what these wise people are saying. However, still the grasp of even wise people ain't good enough here. Still the grasp of these wise people is not based on the thought that love is our life, but on their experience that this is how things happen. So even people who are smart don't get the underlying news from heaven, which is that love is our life. We cannot know what our life is unless we know what love is. If we don't know this, then one person may believe that life is nothing but sensation and action. So you could think, what is it to be alive? What is it to be conscious? Is it defined by the fact when I think about that I'm alive, I think about that I can see things and hear things and all the other things senses you can use? Is that what it is? And in other words, it's thought. If all that was taken away, but you can still just be thinking in a dark vacuum, does that mean that you're you? When in fact, so is that what life is? Life is thought. When in fact, thought is the first effect of life. And sensation and action are secondary effects of life. So it's actually that you've got something back here. Life is something behind. And yeah, that moves into thought. That something is moving into thought, and thought can move into sensory experience, and then action, right? But what's this thing back here? This is life. Thought is the first effect of life, as just noted, but there are deeper and deeper forms of thought as well, and more superficial ones. So the things that just pop into your head are on a different level than the things that are driving those behind. The deepest form of thought, the perception of ends, is actually the first effect of life. But more on this below in connection with levels of life. And if you are an astute viewer of this, you may say, what's this little 2? Well, that is because this is a place where the New Century Edition, of which you probably know Dr. Jonathan Rose, Cara Dom, there's all kinds of people working hard to bring you the translations that we're looking at now. And something really cool that they've done that's, helped pump up my understanding of Swedenborg is they give you sort of in the deluxe editions these reader's guide notes, and there's not them in the PDF because there's not the whole notes thing that comes along with it, but there was one when I was reading the deluxe version, and it had this little 2. And I was like, what's that little 2? And that directs you to footnote 2, because what does this mean? The perception of ends. That's the deepest form of thought. I was hyping it up. That doesn't mean anything. What does that mean? Well, let's see what note 2 has to say for us. Note 2, the Latin term here translated ends, finis, I don't know, what's a Latin accent, is a common philosophical term that includes both the idea of intent and result. Aha! So there's no direct analog, but you get both of these together. I wish we had an example. That doesn't seem tangible. For example, fresh vegetables are the gardener's end, both in the sense that they're the purpose, they're why he's out, or he or she is out in the field, aim or goal the gardener has in mind from the beginning of the process of growing them, and in the sense that the actual vegetables constitute the fulfillment of that intent, the end in the process. Okay, so you're a farmer, and you've got in your mind, when you're out there working in the fields, you've got, let's see, this is a great time for green, you got a cucumber in your mind. You know that song? Oh, no, that's not a real song. You're thinking of that when you go down and you're working with this ground that doesn't have anything growing in it, or maybe it's got cover crops from the previous year, whatever it is, you're working there, you're thinking about, I'm going to make this something that somebody can eat and I can turn a profit on it, but it's also going to, that's in your mind when you're going down and planting these seeds and everything. But when it's all done, the actual cucumber is here. So the end, it's not just the purpose, it's not just the result, it's both. That's the end. The phrase, the perception of ends, the thing we're looking at here, is less common. Swedenborg only uses it here and in 4633 of an earlier work, Secrets of Heaven, which was published in 8 volumes between 1749 and 1756. Now, there's so much Swedenborg. Only 2 times he uses this phrase. That in itself is interesting here. So the perception of ends, not just the end, but it's our ability to know those things, to understand. Because you could go through this without really reflecting on why you're doing it. With gardening, it's pretty tangible. But with this other stuff, with the motivation that we're talking about, do we get it? That thought, the deepest level of thought, thank you very much, note 2, the deepest level of thought is this perception of ends. The thing that's behind the thing that pops into our head is us understanding why we want to think these things, what these thoughts are trying to help us accomplish, why we do the things in our life. That is our life. And that is love. Because everything, Swedenborg is saying, and he thought that, oh no, I'm just back before all this spiritually stuff. He thought, look, I'm just a rational, scientific guy, and I just do things because I see data and I gather them and move in that direction because that's where the data is pointing. But there's always a motive. And I've said this before on this show. That's not bad. There's always a motive. And in every little bit of thought, there is a motive. Why am I taking the time to engage with or formulate or respond to this thought? That is because we love something. It could be we love this thought because we love our reputation, and this thought is going to lead us to somehow boost that. It could be because we love somebody else's welfare. It could be because we love goodness and truth. That is how we start to get into love is actually your life. That there is something driving all of the processes in us, and it's what we really want. That is the life in the very details of the stuff that runs our mind and runs our conscious experience. We get some idea that love is our life from the warmth of the sun in our world. We know this warmth acts like the life shared by all Earth's plants because when it increases in the spring, plants of all kinds sprout from the soil. And that's interesting because we wouldn't think of warmth as a component of life in plants. They're not endothermic. Endothermic. They don't generate their own body heat. So it's got to be warm for them to grow, but really you got to have that warmth. Without the warmth in there, and they're just kind of freeloading off the warmth that the sun provides there, but you have to have that in order for the conditions to at least stay alive. Some things can hibernate, over winter, but to grow and respirate or do whatever they need to do, there has to be this warmth around. They dress themselves in their leafy finery and then in their blossoms and eventually in fruit. This is how they live. When the warmth ebbs away, though, as it does in fall and winter, they are stripped of these signs of life and they wither. And Swedenborg was an avid gardener, so he's seeing this process play out and just like, look, there was this life and then it goes down. Love works the same way in us because love and warmth correspond to each other. This is why love makes us warm. If somebody was a warm person, that means that they're a loving person, right? I mean, we know that these two have some kind of connection. And you think about the garden being like the mind, and that the things that are in there, the pursuits, the things we're interested in, you have phases or certain things you'd love to dive into and learn about or think about or mull over. What is growing and living in us depends on what we care about. It can be a negative sense, like you can be stewing over what somebody said about you because that's damaged your reputation. And so, somebody didn't say about you or some honor you want because all the warmth that's driving that garden is the love of reputation. Or you can be stewing over, there's somebody that I love that's in distress and you want to help them, and that desire to help them is what's growing that. Whatever it is, these are not comprehensive examples. Don't let me oversimplify it and ruin it. You get the broader principle that love is our life. What we love is our life. And that's useful to know. Because when you're going through all this stuff, there is a reason why we tag that word love in there, that he went over all the different meanings of it, right, in the beginning, that somehow that very same thing that is this greatest, aspirational part of human life, that when we do experience the feelings that we regard as most noble, like when people love each other, somehow that very same thing can be our life. And when you think of God is love, God is that life streaming into you. That's how intimately connected you are. So the news from heaven is that regardless of, and we may have to get rid of the yellow to get out these final negative thoughts here. The news from heaven is that you have coursing through your veins, this divine love, and that God continues to want to make that the reason for all the little thoughts, and that the reason for all the little things that happen, and that is what's guiding us to be united and drawn towards everything that's good and happy and true. So when you're out there living, just know you're out there loving something, and the more we can love what's good and true, the more we open up to the divine love, which is what's really going on. That's the news from heaven. How'd you like it? Please like and subscribe if you really loved it, and leave comments. I'd love to hear how the idea strikes you and what you can do with it. I'm always interested. We give you these concepts. How did it help? Because that should be the love that's driving our study of these topics, is we're trying to learn things so that it helps. It helps us be freer and happier so that we can move on and help others. That should be the love that drives it. So I love seeing that in action. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Talk to you soon.